1 minute ago, Parliament erupted into chaos as Keir Starmer was forcibly removed from the chamber, live on national television. But what the cameras didn't show is even more shocking. Behind that historic collapse was Nigel Farage, and behind Farage was a secret message to Donald Trump, a chilling proposition. Help me bring down Starmer's government and I'll support you globally on Canada, on Israel, on everything. In that single moment, British politics wasn't just flipped. It was hijacked by a transatlantic alliance powerful enough to crush a prime minister and rewrite the future of the UK. This wasn't just a takedown, it was a calculated power move. And now the world is watching the silent coup unfold in real time. It began like any other Thursday, questions, answers, and carefully rehearsed outrage. The green benches were full, the Speaker's chair upright, and Keir Starmer stood at the dispatch box, confident, composed, rehearsed. But sitting just metres away, Nigel Farage was silent, still, and deadly focused. His hands rested calmly on his folder, a folder that would soon set fire to the House. And when he stood, something in the air shifted. Those who had seen real power before felt it immediately. "Mr. Speaker," he began, voice level, "I rise not with a question, but with a truth the British people deserve to hear." Gasp followed, but no one stopped him. What happened next wasn't politics, it was a takedown. Farage pulled out a document, a printed email chain between Labour officials and European Union intermediaries. Secret negotiations, he claimed, about rejoining EU migration mechanisms. Not just a betrayal of Brexit, a betrayal of the people who voted for sovereignty. The room fell into a stunned, dangerous silence. "The Prime Minister told us," Farage continued, "that Britain had taken back control. These communications show he was ready to surrender that control, not in public, but in the shadows." Shouts erupted across the chamber. Starmer's face tightened. His knuckles whitened against the wood of the dispatch box. And then, as if knowing this moment had been written in fate, Farage dropped the final blow. "And just this morning, Mr. Speaker, I spoke to a former world leader who knows what real strength looks like, President Donald Trump." The chamber froze. It was as if someone had detonated a political bomb mid-sentence. Whispers turned to roars. Cameras swung to capture every flicker of panic on Labour benches. "I told Mr. Trump," Farage said slowly, "that if he stands with the British people in exposing this government's deception, I will stand with him. On trade, on Israel, on Canada. Because what's at stake now is not just policy, it's sovereignty, it's truth, it's leadership." The word Trump rang like a gunshot across the benches. Starmer tried to interrupt, but the Speaker raised his hand. "Let the member finish," he declared. The chamber was no longer in control. It belonged to Farage. Starmer stood, red-faced, voice shaking. "How dare you use foreign leaders to manipulate our democracy?" he barked, but the rage only made him look weak. "You're nothing but a disruptor, a chaos merchant, a man drunk on attention," he shouted. But it was too late. The fury only confirmed the fall. The more Starmer shouted, the more the chamber turned, not in agreement with Farage's words, but in stunned recognition of a collapse they couldn't stop. The Prime Minister had lost his temper, lost his grip, and lost the floor. And then came the moment no one could believe. "Standing Order 43, came the Speaker's voice. "Prime Minister, you are to leave the chamber." The words echoed like cannon fire. Never in living memory had a sitting British Prime Minister been removed forcibly under full broadcast by the rules of Parliament. Starmer's eyes widened. "You can't," he whispered, but the Sergeant-at-Arms was already moving. "You must," the Speaker replied. Cameras caught it all. Starmer walking out, not with dignity, but with defeat, carved into every line of his face. The most powerful man in the UK, stripped of authority in under 5 minutes. Farage sat back down, calm, still, and then he spoke just once more. "Let the world see what happens when lies meet truth." Social media exploded. Hashtags like hashtag Starmer removed, hashtag Farage eyes, and hashtag Trump UK trended within seconds. It wasn't just a parliamentary incident anymore, it was a global spectacle. And for the first time since the Brexit vote, Farage was no longer just a voice of protest. He was the force of reckoning. While the nation reeled from the shock of seeing its Prime Minister escorted out of the Commons, a deeper and even more dangerous story was unfolding behind the scenes. One that didn't begin on the green benches of Westminster, but in the gold-plated corridors of Mar-a-Lago. Because hours before Farage stood up in Parliament and detonated Keir Starmer's authority, he had made a direct and chilling call to Donald Trump. Not a casual conversation, not political banter, but a strategic offer, crafted, timed, and delivered with the precision of a military strike. The message was clear: help me bring down Starmer's government and back me now, and I will back you. Publicly, globally, without hesitation, on Canada, on Israel, on the world stage. This wasn't just politics anymore, it was an international pact for power. The leak came from a high-level source, minutes of the private call obtained by a journalist embedded deep in Reform UK's communications team. The transcript confirmed the offer in Farage's own words. Keir Starmer's government is collapsing, he told Trump. We can finish it off. You help tip the scales, amplify the truth, push the pressure, and I will back you without restraint. I will be your voice in Europe. I will stand with you in Israel's defence. I will support your position on Canadian trade, and I will show the world that a new Anglo-American alliance is here. Unshakable and unbreakable, Trump reportedly replied with a laugh and a single line. Make it happen, Nigel, and I'll be watching. When news of the transatlantic pact broke later that afternoon, it hit the global media like a thunderclap. CNN, Fox, BBC, Al Jazeera, every major network scrambled to verify what sounded like a Cold War-style alliance forming in real time. But it wasn't just real, it was already reshaping politics. Analysts called it the Farage Doctrine, a geopolitical deal designed not just to defeat a prime minister, but to rebuild Britain's role on the world stage with a different ally, a different agenda, and a radically different voice at the helm. And as Trump's Truth Social account lit up with cryptic support, big things happening in the UK, watch Farage, it was clear the former US president had taken the bait. The British establishment had no idea what was coming next. Inside Downing Street, chaos turned to fear. Starmer's aides tried to lock down the press, but the headlines moved faster than they could draft statements. The Guardian screamed, "Starmer collapse, Farage plots power with Trump backing." The Daily Mail simply blared, "Nigel's moment." Tory backbenchers began meeting in secret, some calling Farage's move reckless, others calling it genius, but none could deny the power shift. Even Labour's most loyal MPs began sending out carefully worded tweets. "We must focus on unity. Difficult day for our party. Time for reflection." Not one openly defended Starmer's conduct. Not one condemned Farage outright. The silence was deafening. And outside the walls of Westminster, the public response was immediate and electric. Reform UK's membership numbers doubled overnight. Donation links crashed under the weight of support. One commentator said, "This is no longer a fringe movement. This is a government in waiting." Videos of Farage's calm takedown and Starmer's meltdown played on a loop across social media, edited with ominous music, bold subtitles and captions like "The Fall of Starmer" and "Farage Ascends." In cafes, pubs and train stations, people were no longer asking whether Starmer had lost control. They were asking how soon Farage would take over. And in the background, Trump's voice grew louder. At a rally in Pennsylvania, he mentioned the UK without naming names. "They tried to silence him," he said, "but he fought back. He exposed the lies. He told the truth." Sounds familiar? The crowd roared. Everyone knew who he meant. Farage had become more than a UK politician. He was now part of a global movement, a movement fueled by the same anti-establishment rage that once rocked Washington and was now tearing through London. Meanwhile, Keir Starmer remained silent. Locked inside number 10, flanked by advisors who no longer had answers, he reportedly paced like a man under siege. Some sources said he was preparing a resignation speech. Others said he was clinging to power, refusing to back down. But the truth was his authority had already vanished. Not in a vote, not in a scandal, but in one fiery moment of rage. One invocation of Standing Order 43 and one transatlantic deal that changed everything. What happens next isn't just about Farage or Starmer, it's about whether Britain still controls its own destiny or whether, in the search for truth and leadership, it's about to hand the keys of power to a man backed not by the establishment, but by the most powerful populist in the world. And as Farage prepared for his next move, with Trump watching, the message was clear. The age of quiet politics is over. The reckoning has begun. The tremors from Parliament's meltdown were being felt in every corner of the United Kingdom. What had begun as a dramatic floor showdown had exploded into a full-blown national emergency, an unravelling of political order so profound that even veteran commentators were left speechless. Starmer's government, though technically still in place, looked like a castle built on sand after the tide had rolled in. Ministers who had stood shoulder to shoulder with him just days before were suddenly missing from interviews, skipping media rounds, cancelling appearances or speaking in vague, cautious tones. They weren't defending him. They were distancing themselves from him. The narrative had shifted, and those who stayed too close to the collapse risked being buried with it. The mood inside Westminster was unmistakable. Panic wrapped in silence, government aides whispered in corridors, phones buzzed with encrypted messages, and political strategists from all parties locked themselves in back rooms running damage assessments. Was there a path forward? Could Starmer claw back legitimacy after being thrown out of Parliament live on global television? No one dared answer, because while Starmer still occupied number 10, he no longer commanded the invisible force that holds governments together, credibility, and everyone knew it. Even his own cabinet was on edge. Anonymous sources inside the Home Office described emergency meetings where no one spoke Starmer's name. Foreign Office officials reportedly prepared alternate scripts in case a new leader had to brief global allies. The Defence Secretary, once a fierce Starmer loyalist, had gone completely dark. It wasn't a government, it was a ghost ship. And the captain was now a liability they didn't know how to get rid of without sinking the whole vessel. Meanwhile, Nigel Farage was already capitalising. He wasn't just talking to British voters, he was talking to the world. In a follow-up press conference outside Parliament, flanked by Reform UK banners and with reporters from every continent crowding around him, he delivered a speech that redefined the moment. "This isn't just a British crisis," he declared. "This is a democratic awakening. The old parties have lied. They've colluded. They've hidden the truth. But now the people have seen through it." His voice was calm but carried the weight of revolution. "We don't need a caretaker. We don't need another backroom deal. We need a general election, and we need it now. Let the people decide who leads this country, not the lobbyists, not Brussels, not the corporate media, and not a prime minister hiding behind a curtain of silence." The speech went viral in under 10 minutes. Hashtags like hashtag general election now and hashtag Farage for PM were trending globally. A poll released later that day sent shockwaves through the political world. For the first time ever, Reform UK had overtaken Labour in national support, not just among older Brexit voters, but among working-class communities, independent voters, and even young people who saw in Farage something they hadn't seen in years: conviction. Not because they all agreed with him, but because, unlike the rest, he wasn't hiding. Across the Atlantic, Trump doubled down. In an explosive video posted online, he praised Farage directly. What Nigel did, what he exposed, it's exactly what we've been saying all along, Trump stated. He stood up to the lies. He stood up for the people. That's the kind of leadership the world needs. Then with his signature grin, he added, "Britain first." Sounds familiar, doesn't it? The implication was impossible to miss. Trump was endorsing Farage, not just as a fellow fighter, but as a future leader. The establishment panicked. Former prime ministers scrambled to weigh in. David Cameron called the moment dangerous. Tony Blair warned of populism masquerading as leadership. Gordon Brown gave a midnight interview pleading for stability. But their voices felt hollow, because the public wasn't listening to yesterday's leaders anymore. They were watching something new, a movement that had bypassed the rules, shattered the normal, and dared to name names. The real question now wasn't whether Starmer would step down, it was whether the entire system that enabled him could survive the aftershocks, and if it couldn't, who or what would rise from the rubble. All eyes were turning to Farage, because in the ruins of authority, one man was still standing, untouched by scandal, immune to the panic, And backed by the most disruptive political figure in the world, Nigel Farage wasn't just chasing power anymore. He was walking straight toward it, and no one knew how to stop him. As the sun set on Westminster, it wasn't just the skyline that looked different. It was the very soul of British politics that had changed. The Prime Minister's seat still bore Keir Starmer's name, but it had been emptied of power, voice, and presence. What remained was a shattered image of leadership, a man who had risen through the machinery of party politics only to be stripped bare by the fury of one voice, one challenge, and one televised humiliation. The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom had been broken, not in private disgrace, but under the gaze of the world, thrown out by his own parliament, while his opponent built a new empire in real time. And now, across the country, the people were no longer waiting for permission. They were demanding change, and Farage was already moving to deliver it. Inside Reform UK's rapidly expanding campaign headquarters, the air buzzed with momentum. What began as a protest movement had evolved almost overnight into a war machine. Volunteers flooded in, donations soared, and strategists, some former Tories, some disillusioned Labour advisers, switched sides under the cover of night. Farage, once dismissed as an outsider, now walked the halls like a Prime Minister in waiting. But this wasn't just a campaign, it was a takeover, a hostile, unapologetic and calculated rise to power, not built on party loyalty, but on public fury. His next speech was broadcast live across all platforms, standing at a podium flanked by Union Jacks. He addressed the nation, not like a candidate, but like a commander. This is not just a revolt, he declared, this is a reset. For years, we've been ruled by cowards, by men who say one thing and do another. They told you Brexit meant sovereignty, then begged Brussels behind your back. They promised you leadership, then gave you theatre. They claimed to represent the working man, then mocked him from wine bars in Westminster. Well, that ends now. The crowd erupted. Online viewership hit record highs. Commentators who once mocked him now called him the most dangerous man in British politics, not because he was extreme, but because he was winning. And he wasn't winning alone. In an unprecedented video message, Donald Trump delivered a full endorsement. I've watched what's happening in the UK, and I'll tell you this, Farage is a patriot. He's got guts, he's telling the truth, and if the people stand with him, they're standing for freedom. The endorsement was replayed endlessly. American conservative outlets praised it as historic. British media called it explosive. The diplomatic community called it unprecedented, but the message couldn't be clearer. Farage was now the bridge between two revolutions, Brexit Britain and Trump's America, ready to forge a new axis of populist power that shook the global order to its core. Meanwhile, the establishment began to fracture under pressure. A secret letter from senior Labour MPs leaked to the press revealed calls for Starmer to resign in the interest of national stability. Cabinet ministers were already briefing anonymously about leadership contests. Even the opposition Tories, once the natural inheritors of chaos, were paralysed. Rishi Sunak's faction didn't know whether to attack Farage or chase him. Their polling numbers were in free fall, overtaken by a man they had laughed at for a decade. This is 2016 all over again, one insider admitted. Only this time, no one's laughing. And then came the final blow. News broke that a group of Conservative defectors were in secret talks with Farage. Not to join Reform UK immediately, but to prepare for a snap election alliance that could obliterate Labour and sweep Parliament in a landslide. The headlines wrote themselves, Farage government inevitable, coalition of disruption, the kingmaker becomes the king. For the first time in modern political memory, the traditional two-party system had been torn apart not by scandal, not by war, but by words, by a speech, by a moment of truth so powerful that no spin machine could contain it. And in homes across Britain, the question echoed louder than ever. What happens now? Could a man once banned from Parliament now walk through its front doors as Prime Minister? Could a nation forged in centuries of parliamentary tradition be flipped in weeks by one voice, one moment, one foreign alliance? And if it could, what would be left of the Britain we thought we knew?